Jesus says, call nobody a father, call nobody a teacher, and call nobody a master. Well, if he really means that we're supposed to remove those words from our vocabulary, then we can't celebrate Father's Day anymore. We need a new word for the people who teach us at school. And when the master's tournament is on TV, you better turn it off. Christianity as a whole has never looked at this passage with that kind of literal interpretation that Jesus wants us to remove those words from our vocabulary. But in the context of this, it's very clear what Jesus is doing here. Jesus is challenging those who do hold legitimate positions of authority and power to make sure they live it in such a way that they still choose to be humble, that they choose to be servants of others, right? Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So he's criticizing the scribes and the Pharisees who Jesus wants them to still observe everything that they say, just don't do what they do. Like, they still hold this position, but it's shameful the way that they choose to live this out. They're very puffed up with their own pride. And he's calling everyone who might find themselves in a position of authority to live it humbly. And he's interesting, he knows that the apostles are right there, so he's kind of saying this to them, like, don't allow yourselves to be so puffed up with pride. You won't be able to reach people's hearts if you're puffed up with pride. I was thinking about this, that sometimes we can get so irritated at a person if they're really talking about themselves a lot. Like, whatever. Maybe many of us struggle with that. I have struggled with that at times. And yet, whenever we see it in somebody else, it always gets under our skin. That person who just can't stop talking about how great their whatever is, or how good they are at this or that, or how perfect things seem to be for them, it drives us all crazy. I've been reading a book by John Steinbeck, a novelist, American novelist, and the book's called East of Eden. It's a huge book. And the other day I was struck by a passage in there. There's this long narrative about this family in California, and suddenly, I don't know, most of the way through the book, suddenly the author, kind of the narrator, breaks from telling the story and just starts addressing the reader out of nowhere. And it's a commentary on humanity, on just human nature. And the narrator says, basically, that it seems to him that every person just ultimately wants to be good and wants to be loved. And whatever our vices are, it's us seeking one of those two things, but in the wrong way. It was really insightful, and it's something that St. Augustine said very similarly, that no matter what we choose, even when we choose evil, we're still choosing something that we perceive to be good, at least in some way for ourselves. But it points to a fact that there's a brokenness within us. Like, we can get really irritated at someone else's pride when they're so puffed up and they just love the attention. It gets under our skin. But if we can really pay attention, that there's a brokenness that's happened in their life that has shaped them and made them this way. I found myself in a conversation with someone a while back, and I found myself getting irritated at how much they were talking about themselves. But I was graced with this moment of sadness for them as they were talking, because I realized this is a very broken person. Because I felt like I could see in them a little child just longing for affirmation that they're good. And so they've spent so much of their life trying to convince all the people around them that they're good. Please pay attention to me. I'm good, I promise. It's very sad. But ultimately, I think that that's part of what's underneath that sin, even, of pride, that Jesus is calling people to work against. So today, maybe that's an encouragement for us to, I don't know, have a little mercy on the people who irritate every one of us when they start talking about themselves. Recognize that there's a brokenness in their life. They still need affirmation. They still long to be good, and they long to be loved. And pray for our leaders, the people who are legitimate fathers and teachers and masters in this world, people who hold authority and positions of legitimate power, to pray for them, that they would choose to be servants among us. And if we find ourselves in those roles as well, that the Lord would give us the grace to humble ourselves so that someday we would be exalted with him.